Okay, so this is just a little statement by Dr. Sarah Sample that describes what safety thermometer is about. And what she actually says is safety thermometer provides a temperature check on harm that can be used alongside other measures of harm to measure local and system progress in providing a care environment free of harm for our patients. So that's quite wordy, but basically safety thermometer is about collecting data that gives us an idea of how much harm-free care we're delivering. So this is what I think it's actually nicer talking about harm-free care than, harms, but it does measure harms in our service. Why did we introduce safety thermometer? There were several reasons. One of the reasons was because we don't have any legislation here in Guernsey in the way that they do in the UK, where they've got CQC that go around and monitor areas. We also had the NMC over in 2014 and 2015, and they raised concerns regarding assurances around evidence-based standards of care. So we needed to do something about that. The safety thermometer gives us the opportunity to benchmark against the NHS, because the data that's collated goes to the NHS. It's collated with lots of trusts throughout the UK, and then they send us back a report, with our figures in. We can see where we are, and we can see where we lie in relation to the NHS. So it gave us the opportunity to measure local system progress in providing a care environment free of harm for our patients. What does it achieve? It's a snapshot view, so we have to be a little bit cautious here. So 1 day a month, we actually gather the data. On the classic thermometer, it sort of tends to be the middle Wednesday of the month, and with the others, it tends to be towards the end of the month. But we gather data on 1 day a month. So you have to be a bit cautious because it is 1 day a month. So really, you need to have several months' data before you can start getting an idea of, we need to look at trends and actually see where we're going from there. It helps teams in a wide range of settings, from acute wards to patient's own home, to measure, assess, learn and improve the safety of the care they provide. As we go through the presentation, I think that will become more clear to you. So our journey, it started off with the initiative and the vision from the interim head of governance and the chief nurse, Steve Hams, when he was here. Some of you may remember. Do you remember we had Steve Hams over here for a while? And Elaine Burgess at that time was the assistant director for acute services. They actually decided that this was something that they wanted to introduce here in Guernsey. So they actually appointed somebody from the UK called Liz. I can't remember her surname.
I think it was Ward.
Yeah, it may well have been Liz Ward, and they brought her here for 3 months to set it up, to get us set up. And at that point in time, we actually started with the classic thermometer, the mental health thermometer, and the maternity. I will go on and expand what talk about those a little bit further. We collected data for 12 months and shared that with senior nurses within the acute settings to sort of see, sort of get an idea of how it worked and actually see where we were going. We really needed 12 months of data before we could actually get a good feel for where we were in relation to other areas. After that, the data analysis was identified and initial areas for improvement based upon levels or incidents of harm were looked at. And that's when we started seeing that our falls were a problem. Other areas where we were collecting data were showing that as well, such as the Ulysses incident reporting system. It's not just from a safety thermometer. There were several areas that we soon identified that we needed to do something about falls. We set up a working group across the acute inpatient wards and the different departments, and had representatives from all areas on that working group. And then we started developing policies and processes, looking particularly at falls. Okay. The different thermometers one of them is the classic, and this is the one that actually the bulk of areas actually work on. We actually submit data to the classic in most areas. It focuses on 4 most commonly occurring harms in healthcare. So these are the things that we're looking at. The pressure ulcers. So pressure ulcers, we're looking at how many of our patients or service users have pressure ulcers, and we're looking at new and old pressure ulcers. So if somebody's got an old pressure ulcer, that means that it was acquired before they came into our care. And then the new pressure ulcers are those that have come into our care and have obtained a pressure ulcer while they're in our care. So those are the ones that we're particularly interested in, because those are the ones we really want to avoid, don't we? Falls, and we look at the number of falls we're having on that snapshot day, and it looks back 72 hours, I think, if I remember correctly. But we're looking at falls with harm. It will only come up as a harm if that person who's fallen has had harm from the fall. And then we're looking at urinary tract infections in patients with a catheter and venous thromboembolism. So if somebody's had a venous thromboembolism in our care, it will come up as a harm. However, they do also ask how many of our patients have had a documented risk assessment and how many of them have been given prophylaxis. So we've got other data we can look at, not just the harms. Okay. The other safety thermometer that we actually introduced was in mental health, and this is for acute mental health. Again, they identified the common occurring harms that harms in people that engage in the mental health services. So they look at self-harm, how many people have had self-harm on the day of survey in the previous 72 hours. If they feel safe when they are in care. Violence and aggression, if they've been the victim of violence and aggression in the last 72 hours. If there's been any omissions in medications in the previous 24 hours. And it will also ask whether, if there is an omission, whether that was a refusal or if there was a valid reason for it not being given. But the harm will be if you've actually not given it and there was no valid reason and there was no refusal. And then it looks at restraint as well. Okay. Maternity, we did start using the maternity thermometer. However, we now don't use that one any longer, because with the maternity department, with it being a snapshot view, 1 day a month, often on that day there were no births. So they were unable to do it. So what they're actually doing is a classic thermometer. So it will look at some of the other things, urinary tract infections, VTEs, things like that, but not the actual maternity one. We've got 2 lower numbers for it to work here. And then children and young people, we have now started, Frossard Ward has started entering data on the children and young people safety thermometer, and they look at deterioration. So this is if an early warning score has been completed, they ask if a early warning score has been completed, and then if there's any deterioration, was it escalated? And if that is a no, that would be a harm, classed as a harm. Remember everything else, if it wasn't, it would be harm-free. Extravasation, I can have real difficulty saying that word. Pain and skin integrity, they look at those areas on the children's thermometer. Medication. Pharmacy have done a brilliant job with this because they are looking at medication on every patient and every ward and department in the on the PEH site. Am I correct in that? It's every one of them, and that's a huge amount of work. And they've been collecting data on these 4 areas: medication reconciliation, whether we're recording allergy status, if there's any medication omissions, and identifying any harm from high-risk medicines. So there's a lot more questions, but those are the sort of 4 main areas there. How do we use the data from the safety thermometer? We're having regular monthly meetings, so the service managers and specialist nurses attend that meeting, and we look at all of the areas. So we look at the classic thermometer and we look at all of the wards, and then we look at the mental health, we look at all of the thermometers, look at every department and see if we can identify any areas where there are harms that maybe we need to do something about. We also look at the trend and how we are in comparison to the NHS. And if there's any areas there that concern us, we actually decide on if there's anything more that needs to be done. And this is how the falls work. They're sort of developed. We've seen this and we've seen this as a problem. We need to do something about it. We discuss any harms that are identified, and then we develop initiatives. For example, the falls bundles, and also there's been a new policy with regards to VTEs put in place. Right, this is a graph from the safety thermometer that shows this was all 2017's harm-free care. What the NHS state is that we should be aiming for above 95%. Okay, so if you look at that, the orange line there is the NHS national average line. Now you'll notice theirs is a fairly flat line and ours goes up and down, and that's because we're dealing with small numbers. So you only have to have a small number of harms to put the percentage, significantly up. So that's why you get quite a few peaks and troughs in it. But if you look at that, this was 2017. Now, when we first started doing the safety thermometer, it was back in 2015, the end of 2015, our harm-free care was down in the 80s. It has now, you'll notice that there's quite a few there that are above the national average, but also above the 95%. If you look at the dotted line, that is our trend. And that really probably gives us a better indication of how we're doing, because it takes all of the whole year's figures into account, and you can see that one's going up. So that's all encouraging. It would suggest that we're improving, that we're getting less harms, more harm-free care. Okay. This is the graph 2017 of the falls with harm. 2017 was better than 2016. Probably should have put 2016's up there, but 2017's you can still see the national average there is lower than the majority of ours. Apart from September and October, we are above. However, if you look at the trend, we're coming down, getting better. Falls are coming down. So what did we do to address the harms? We looked at the falls, and there's a little definition there. It's an event whereby the patient comes to rest on the floor or another lower level with or without the loss of consciousness. That's from the National Patient Safety Agency. The next graph is actually looking at the falls from the Ulysses reporting system, because probably the majority of you are familiar with the Ulysses reporting system. If anybody falls, we ask that you put in an incident. And people are very good, I think, at doing that. They do report them. And this graph here actually shows you the figures of the falls in 2015, 2016, 2017. And if you look at 2016, the green pillar there is the number of falls we had that year, which was 1,043 falls that year. If you look at the same pillar on 2017, the falls had come down to 788. That's quite a significant drop. I think we worked it out at about 25%. So that was really encouraging. Now, at the beginning of 2017, there was quite a significant drop. And then again in the last quarter. In the first quarter, we introduced sensor mats. And in the last quarter, we introduced the falls bundles. So we're hoping, that may be why, and that it's going to continue.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
All those falls are with and without harm, or just with harm?
Yeah. That you see the little yellow pillar. That's the falls with harm. Okay. So in 2016, there were 381 falls with harm, and in 2017 there were 329. So they'd come down, sort of a fair amount as well. And if you look at the trends, the orange line at the top are the numbers of falls generally, and the black one further down is the number of falls with harm, and that's coming down as well. Right at the very bottom there, you can see some little black lines right along the bottom. That's the number of serious incidents we had following falls. So serious incidents, somebody who sustained a serious fall or death. And we had 10 in 2016 and 7 in 2017. But we're hoping now with the new falls bundles, 2018 will continue to improve. It's too early to say whether that's as a result of the work that we've done, but it's encouraging, and we're hoping that it will.
And I could just interject there, we've actually only had one serious incident reported this year so far, which is far less than the last few years. And it is a fall, but we had more than that by this time last year. It's too early to say, as Jill rightly says, but encouraging signs.
Yeah. So, what has been done to address the harms? We started off by doing a literature review to look at what was out there and what we needed to do. We decided to adopt the Fall Safe project, which a lot of you may well now have heard of it because we've adopted it. And we incorporated the components of that into our policy and rewrote the policy. Fall Safe was funded by the Health Foundation, and they found, following the introduction of Fall Safe, that there were substantial improvements in the delivery of care, and it's estimated that the project may have delivered a 25% reduction in falls. That comes from the Royal College of Physicians, who were very proactive and very much involved with the Fall Safe project, as were the Royal College of Nursing, British Geriatric Society, and the National Patient Safety Agency. So there were a group of people that got together to put this Fall Safe project together. And basically it's about using multifactorial assessment for assessing patients, at risk of falls, and then acting on each aspect of that assessment where appropriate. So it's got to be a multifactorial approach to manage falls effectively, and that's the approach that we took on. What are our objectives? We formed a multidisciplinary working group, and that's still in place, and we got together to actually look at what we wanted to do. It wasn't just me. There was a whole group of us that worked on it, decided on how we were going to do it. We had physiotherapists, occupational therapists, ward nurses from the wards, sort of different groups of people that actually were on, and we also had Dr. Briggs on the working group, and we worked together to see, what way we were going to go. As I said before, we reviewed the evidence, and then we developed the policy and the Fall Safe care bundles with the ultimate aim to reduce the falls by 20% in 2018. And as we saw before, in fact, we reduced the falls in 2017 by more than that. Okay. Actions. Policy and care bundles were produced on the Fall Safe project. We evaluated the Fall Safe project in 4 areas before introducing it fully. They were reviewed at a multidisciplinary team, and the new policy and documents were launched in November 2017. And then there was education and training delivered, and that's still ongoing. We're doing that, you know, sort of ongoing. Vicky, do you want to? Vicky's going to speak about the next slide, because it's a little bit about how we would have done things differently. And following Vicky's Safer Every Day, the knowledge that she's gained from having done that, I think we would now have done this differently. And so she's going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just very briefly, I went away to the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, for those who don't know, and became a patient safety executive. And following that provided me with some methodology that we need to use in order to reduce or improve outcomes, reduce harms, and develop and improve our quality regarding the care we deliver. And during that session, or during the first day I think it was, we talked about when introducing anything new, not to do things like pilots, is what they said, because a pilot you could start and say, I'm going to do this for the next 6 months, and people may choose to sit on effectively the fact that the pilot isn't working. So that the first time you try something, you carry on trying it and trying it again, knowing it's not working, but you're doing it for 6 months because you're collecting the pilot data. So in 6 months' time, you say, well, it didn't work. And what they're basically saying is that we should do things in smaller pieces, a bit more piecemeal, if you like, and change things using what they refer to as a small test of change, using the plan, do, study and act cycle. So we had literally just introduced the falls bundle and the policy, and likewise we just introduced the VTE checklist and the VTE policy, and just literally gone, here it is, and off you go. And I just sat there and thought, oh, we could have done this so differently, because what happened, understandably, some areas found it difficult to try and implement it. Some of them found it quite an unwieldy document, and it was causing them some anxiety because they didn't feel they had the time to complete the paperwork, and felt possibly in some ways it was taking them away from actually what they thought they should be doing. I think that mindset is slightly changing. But had we broken it down and not felt possibly quite so much under pressure, which I think we did because of the high level of falls that was clearly evident, there was a sort of sense of urgency to get something out and to get it working and to get it embedded. And I think that possibly took away from us the opportunity to just try it a little bit harder and a little bit better in areas. So going forward, that is what we need to do with whatever initiatives we do. We need to do it with one person and one patient and get that feedback, and then go out a bit further. That one person again goes and does it with a few more people and tries these things out. If we do that, we'll get better outcomes and we'll get better engagement with staff. It's tried and tested, it works, and I think going forward we would do that. And in actual fact, what we've said and what we are doing is, because people have had difficulties with the documentation, with the care bundle package, and when we've done an audit, which I think Jill might talk a little bit about, but within those audits it became obvious that some of the extra supplementary information that allows you to elaborate as to why you're making the decision or your assessment wasn't actually being completed. It was just being ticked to say, yes, I've discussed it, if you like, but there wasn't any detail behind it. So what we've decided to do, Jill and I think Elaine have worked together with, I'm not sure with anybody else, but possibly on developing some suggestions about what the types of things you need to write in it. And this looks like this little document here. Now what we've done, rather than just say this is how it looks and this is what we're doing, is we're trying it with 15 areas or 15 people who are trying it in their areas and feeding back whether it's working or not working and what we need to change or add to it to make it the right document that will help you, if you're using it, to fill it in effectively, which ultimately helps reduce the falls and identifies any further risks. So we've learnt, I think we can say, and this is still work in progress, so we're still waiting. You had some feedback today, I think you said, Jill. So we're still waiting to collate that data, and then hopefully eventually you will have something like this, but it will be the size that fits in your pocket. So we're working on making that smaller as well, so it's accessible to you and can be used more readily. So I'm going to hand back to Jill now, because that was just my little bit about something I learned from going away to the IHI.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Well, the next one was the glass. Okay, so we spoke, Vicky mentioned that we completed an audit. After introducing the bundles, we went around and audited every department to see how they were doing with them, how they were being completed. And what we actually decided to do is we used the same audit tool that the Fall Safe project had used in the UK. So again, we had something to compare against. This is our figures here, and you can see that we sort of, it was quite pleasantly surprising really, because we'd only had the new policy in place about 3 months, I think it was, when we actually did this, and we were quite pleased with the outcomes at that stage, you know. You can see there that we did well on making sure that patients, service users had their call bell in sight and in reach of patients. That was 90% of the patients that we actually audited had them in place and in reach. Also mobility aids, that was quite good. People did have their mobility aids in their reach, where they could actually easily access them. 82% of the patients we audited had continence and toilet care plans written. The areas we didn't do quite so well in was vision, the completion of a vision assessment, because a lot of people fall because of their vision, and a lot of people won't tell you about their vision. You actually do need to make a little bit of an assessment to see what their vision is like, and we only 42% had been completed in that area. 77% had their medications looked at and reviewed, and 36% only had the measurement of lying and standing blood pressure, which was a bit disappointing because it is known that actually that does contribute to people's falls quite significantly. So we're going to try and work on these things and try and get people, you know, in the classroom sessions I'm going to be talking about why we need to do lying and standing blood pressure and how to do it. And the little booklet has got information about that as well, how we should be doing it. And then 62% were assessed for the presence or absence of delirium. Now I would say that a year ago that would have been a lot lower.
So I've got a question.
Yes.
When it comes to the medication bit,
Yeah.
was that part of the bundle that someone filled in, or was that reviewed by the doctor, by the pharmacist?
It should have been reviewed by the doctor. They should have actually, if it was identified that they were on high risk medication, you know, high risk of falls type medication, the nursing staff would be asking the doctors to review their medication, and that's what we were looking for, to see if that had actually happened. And what they should be saying on the bundle, that has happened, but they should be documenting in the actions exactly what they did. And that's where in the audit they fell down quite a lot. Often it would just tick that they'd done it, but there was no evidence, and that's what we've got to work on. We've got to get them to say, what did they do? What was changed? You know, who did they get to review it? What medication was changed? And that's what was missing. They were documenting that it was being done, but the evidence wasn't there of exactly what they'd done.
I'm guessing it'd be difficult for you to even assess if that review was appropriate, because they might have stopped the wrong medicine, or they might have...
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we need that written down. We need to know what's been done. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. The next one here actually looks at the figures in comparison to the same key indicators from the UK trusts. Jersey was in this as well, which was quite interesting. But you can actually see ours are the turquoise and theirs are the yellow. So in fact, we actually have compared really well with them, except for the vision. They have more patients the vision being assessed. That didn't surprise me actually, because I think in the UK, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the UK, if people have a problem with their vision, they can get opticians in. Here, if somebody's got a problem with their optician, with their vision, you know, it involves a cost if you want them to see an optician. So I think that question's not asked as much. They don't actually, you know, they don't always assess the vision as well here because of that issue. Okay. This is a different type of chart. It's the radar chart, which actually shows the same figures just in a different format. And I think, Vicky, what you were saying earlier on, this is how they're wanting us to present things in the future. But you can see that the yellow are our figures and the green is the NHS. Now, if we were perfect in doing everything to 100%, all of that radar chart would be filled in with colour. So you can see from that where we need to work, where we need to develop. And you can see this, the measurement of lying and standing blood pressure and the assessment of vision. You know, there's quite significant large areas there that need to be filled in. So we're working on that. We're addressing it in classroom, sort of in education, and trying to actually get this more efficient. Okay. So yeah, this is really just going over a little bit of what I've actually said. That what did the audit identify, and how are we going to address them in comparison to the UK national figures? We're doing fairly well, but the actions. They need to complete the action section saying exactly what they have done, and more documentation. And I know this is really difficult because everybody's really busy, but sadly it's just becoming more necessary as time goes by. We're sort of there's more litigation, and you just need to have the documentation there. So how are we going to do it? We're providing more teaching to develop an understanding of the topics within a multifactorial assessment, and we're demonstrating accurate use and completion of full safe care bundles. So in those teaching sessions we're doing, that's what we're addressing, showing people, what I actually do in the teaching sessions is we actually give scenarios, different scenarios, and ask someone to actually complete the documentation, talk about them, and complete that documentation. So what's next? We're going to develop a tool for use in the community. In fact, that's already well in progress. There's a falls assessment working group, a community working group in place, and they're looking at that to actually extend it out into the community. Further engagements with patients, service users and their families. Now, when we actually put together these falls bundles, there was a family that we worked with, actually, somebody who had expressed a lot of concern because their mother had fallen, and they were quite concerned about quite a few issues. We actually worked quite a lot with them, and we actually showed them what we were doing and how we were going to go about making changes, and that was really beneficial for us and for them. I think that because they felt that we were doing something about it and we were listening to them and we were working with them, that they felt a lot better about the whole situation, and we actually gained quite a bit from them. You'd be surprised really, what information they gave us that was really useful. They made suggestions and ideas and that were really useful. So engaging with patients, service users and their families, I'd like to see us doing more of that. Continuing to monitor, review and audit outcomes. I think that's actually necessary, because if it's not doing the job, we have to change it. If it's not working, this for Vicky's say for every day, if it doesn't work, you stop it. So we've got to audit it and make sure that things are working. Measure and improvement plans, environmental risk assessments. So we are actually doing some audit and risk assessments on particular areas, and we've got here the dignified throne, because I don't know if any of you went to we had a falls conference and we brought somebody over from the UK, and one of the lecturers spoke about the dignified throne, which was talking all about the bathroom, and how sort of a lot of falls happen in bathrooms, and she was going through all the reasons why. So what we actually do is we've been auditing bathrooms, and we also have an environmental audit tool that we actually do for all of the areas. So that's part of the bundle. Yeah, every area should do that. Should actually do an audit of their environment every 3 months. Yeah. So we continue to review the evidence-based and spread the word. Here we go.